Well, hello, this is Andrew Costa. So I'm saying hi to Facebook land, and I'm saying hi to our internet family as we get together for another little bit of Bible study. These little lessons that I've been putting together as I've been doing my readings through the week. And so today we're going to talk about a very famous character and passage out of the book of Judges. So the first 5 books of the Bible are called the Torah or the Pentateuch, and they're the very important books to how the Israelites of that time and modern day Jews create their identity, how they see themselves as God's people. But once those 5 books are over and the history that they tell, then comes more history of the Jewish people. So the next book is the book of Judges, and so now you got the history or the book of Joshua. So you get the continued history of the Jews from the point of view of Joshua, and then the next book is called Judges. We are in Judges today. Judges has all of these characters in it that are there to judge Israel, but the word judge in this case does not mean to do some sort of jurist work. Like, this isn't like a legal situation with the judge. The judges in this are leaders, military leaders that lead Israel in very, very hard times. The thing with the judges is, as you go on, the judges start out as virtuous, and then they decline in virtue and become less virtuous as you move on. And so the later you are in the book of Judges, the least virtuous the characters are getting, or the less virtuous the characters are getting. They're still saving Israel, but the only saving people that God has to send are people without virtue. And so this is about Samson. Samson is somewhat famous for having, really loved Delilah. So there's that famous 80s song, "Someday we'll know why Samson loved Delilah. Someday we'll know why the sky is blue." Right, so he's somewhat immortalized in poetry and literature, but he was not virtuous at all. He lied often. He would touch dead creatures. Remember, for Jewish people, touching dead creatures was outside the law of Moses, so it wasn't really something they were supposed to be doing. There are just many ways in which he showed himself not to be a man of virtue. Eventually, after having killed many Philistines in different battles, because that's who they're up against, are the Philistines. They'd gone up against the Philistines in many battles. They finally capture Samson because Samson gives away his secret that his strength is in his hair. So his wife cuts his hair, and then he loses his superhuman strength and is only as strong as a normal man. And he's captured, and they poke out his eyes. And so if we're reading in chapter 16, verse 23, "Now the lords of the Philistines gathered to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice. And they said, 'Oh, our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hands.'" So they're worshiping for a false god, Dagon. So for the Philistines, they often were worshiping Baal or Dagon. In this case, Dagon. When they had saw him, they praised their God, for they said, "Our God has given our enemy into our hand, the ravager of our country, who has killed many of us." And when their hearts were merry, they said, "Call Samson, that he may entertain us." So when their hearts were merry means when they had a lot to drink, a lot of alcohol, and they were in a bit of a celebratory mood, they decided to bring out their captive, Samson, who is going to entertain them. Basically just be brought out and displayed, with his eyes poked out and his lack of strength and his short hair. So they called Samson out of the prison, and he entertained them. They made him stand between the pillars. And Samson said to the young man who held him by the hand, "Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against him." Now the house was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women who looked on while Samson entertained. Remember, there was some rain in this time and place, but there wasn't a ton of rain, so the roof was probably open, so that with the 3,000 men and women on the roof, They're probably standing up on top of a roof-like structure, but then there's a way to see in, and there would have been like a courtyard. And supposedly there's 3,000 men and women on the roof. Now let me just say that 3,000 men and women on a roof is a huge number. And one thing we need to just kind of deal with when we're thinking about the book of Joshua and Judges and the book of Numbers in the Pentateuch is they're using certain ways of counting people in Hebrew that it could either mean these humongoid numbers that we see, like that there's 1.6 million Jews, or it could mean much more modest numbers, like there was 3,500 Jews. And when you look at the scope of the Jewish conquest of the Holy Land, and you think about the size of populations back in the time, there is an argument for the smaller numbers. And again, they're counting here, quote unquote, 3,000 men and women. It could be a much shorter number. It's not because like anybody's lying or trying to say something incorrectly. There's just two ways that you could count these numbers. And historians are still sorting it out. Like what do the numbers in these early Hebrew texts actually mean? So if you want to read 3,000 and say it was 3,000 men and women, it is here written in the text that way, and I think there's some wisdom to just accepting that. If you want to ask the next question and wrestle with the text and see what historians are saying, I think that's an okay exercise as well. Not everybody has that kind of time or gumption, but some people really do. What we do know is that on the roof there were a lot of men and women, otherwise they wouldn't have mentioned it. They mentioned it. It's a big number, maybe even 3,000. Then Samson called on the Lord and said, "O Lord, please remember me. Please strengthen me only this once, O God, that I may avenge the Philistines for my 2 eyes." And Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested, and he leaned his weight against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he bowed, and with all his strength, he bowed with all his strength, and the house fell upon the lords and upon the people who were in it. So the dead whom were killed at his death were more than those whom he killed in his lifetime. Then his brothers and family came down, took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol at the tomb of Manoah, his father. He judged Israel for 20 years. Now, the last thing I'll say is Samson comes and he destroys this idolatrous temple because God strengthens him and gives him a capability to do so. But he has to ask God to do it. This once, God, can you come and help? Here's the good news. At the time of Samson, the Holy Spirit would come on specific people for specific tasks and then withdraw. But now on this side of Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit comes on all of God's people and empowers us to do our work for our whole lives. So we always have the Spirit with us. We don't have to worry the way Samson did about not having the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit being withdrawn from us. When Jesus Christ dies on the cross, he gives us many gifts. He takes away our sin. He gives us everlasting life. He gives us the power of the Holy Spirit. And so what we see in Samson is he does great things, but he has a capability that is an Old Testament capability where the Holy Spirit only helps in certain scenarios. But we're waiting for the newer and better Samson, Jesus Christ, who is a virtuous judge, who judges Israel for all times, because he's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And he doesn't need the Holy Spirit. He sends the Holy Spirit. Jesus is the newer and better Samson. He's the greatest judge. Well, I hope you guys have a lovely weekend. Hope to see some of you at church on Sunday. Have a great Sunday.